In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, August 22nd, here in South Korea. The Bank of Korea is maintaining its benchmark interest rate at 3.5% for the 13th session in a row, amid escalating household debt and home prices. Over in the US, the Democratic National Convention ends its third night Wednesday with the party's vice presidential candidate Tim Waltz taking the podium to pledge commitment to winning the November election. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry says its air forces shot down 11 Ukrainian drones over Moscow and its surrounding region in the largest air raid against its capital area since the start of its war in 2022. We start with the central bank's latest decision regarding its base rate, which remains unchanged at 3.5% since January last year. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin reports.
The Bank of Korea has held its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.5%. The decision was announced on Thursday following the second Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the second half of the year.
We have unanimously decided that it would be appropriate to maintain our current monetary tightening stance while inflation is slowing, because we need to monitor the impact that real estate policies and global risk aversion will have on financial stability.
This is the 13th time in a row that the BOK has decided to freeze the rate, its longest rate freeze streak. The base rate was last raised in January 2023 to the current 3.5% and has been left steady since then. The rate freeze decision this month comes despite inflation remaining in the 2% range for 4 months straight. Recent data shows that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 2.6% in July compared to the same month the year before. This is higher than it was in June, though, when consumer prices rose by 2.4%, the lowest since July 2023. There are also ongoing concerns about growing household debt and housing prices. Data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed that the country's balance of household credit, an indicator of household debt, came to more than $1.4 trillion in the April to June period. That's the highest on record on a quarterly basis. Mortgage loans led the increase, surging by nearly $12 billion compared to the previous quarter. This comes as home prices in Seoul went up by 0.76% compared to the previous month in July, the largest rise seen since December 2019, according to Korea Real Estate Board. The BOK's decision was also influenced by the U.S. Central Bank in its most recent meeting deciding to keep interest rates unchanged, as it's unlikely that the BOK will cut interest rates ahead of the United States, with the current interest rate gap at its largest ever at 2 percentage points. But as the Fed is widely expected to cut interest rates from as early as September, the Bank of Korea could also cut rates in its next policy meeting in October. Also on Thursday, the BOK lowered its economic growth outlook for this year to 2.4% from the previously forecast 2.5%. And this year's inflation forecast was also lowered from 2.6% to 2.5%. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And as mentioned in that report, speculation is mounting about a rate cut in September by the U.S. Federal Reserve following the release of July's meeting minutes. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
From March 2022 to July 2023, the U.S. Federal Reserve raised its key interest rate a total of 11 times. Since then, the benchmark lending rate has remained in the 5.25 to 5.5% range. However, that could change next month with the Federal Open Market Committee set to make its next rate decision. According to minutes of the FOMC from July 30th to 31st, released on Wednesday, the vast majority of members believe it would be appropriate to lower the benchmark interest rate in September if economic indicators proceed as expected. Watchers are anticipating a 50 basis point cut, in line with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group Fed Watch, which indicated a 39% chance that the U.S. Central Bank would lower the benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points next month. Recent employment figures released by Washington further fuel the prospect of a rate cut next month. According to the U.S. Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics on Wednesday, the U.S. job market is not as hot as initially thought. Data showed that there were 818,000 fewer jobs in March of this year than initially reported. This means that the U.S. job growth from April 2023 to March 2024 was about 30% lower than previously reported, marking the biggest downward revision since 2009. Traditionally, the U.S. Fed cuts rates on poor employment data, with the latest figures putting pressure on policymakers to cut rates. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Staying in the U.S., the Democratic National Convention closed its third night on Wednesday in Chicago, with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz taking the podium to accept the party's nomination for vice president. Calling the nomination the honor of his life, Walz thanked Vice President Kamala Harris for inviting him to join her presidential campaign. He framed his speech around the concept of community and a hard-working middle class, using several rousing sports metaphors, saying that the party had the right team to win. He also commended President Joe Biden for his leadership while calling for the need to turn the page on Republican candidate Donald Trump. U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly spoke on the phone on Wednesday about efforts to ensure a halt in fighting in Gaza and safe passage for hostages taken by the latter last October. According to the White House, President Biden underscored the need, urgency that is, of sealing the latest ceasefire and hostage deal as negotiators prepare to meet in Cairo for related talks. The two leaders also touched upon ongoing U.S. commitment to defending Israel against threats from Iran and militant groups in the region. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris is also said to have joined the phone call. Russia's defense ministry claims its air forces shot down about a dozen Ukrainian drones over Moscow in the largest air raid against its capital area since the start of its war in 2022. Our Ian has more.
Russia's defense ministry said its air defenses repelled a total of 45 drones in Russian territory on Wednesday, including 11 over the Moscow region, 23 over the border region of Bryansk, and 6 over the Belgorod region. Russian authorities, as well as the mayor of Moscow, called it among the most significant attacks on Moscow by Ukrainian drones since the start of the war in February 2022. According to the acting governor of the Bryansk region, no injuries or major damage was reported in the Moscow or Bryansk regions, but in the Kursk region, 1 woman was killed and 2 other people hospitalized. Ukraine previously targeted Russia's capital in July 2023 when drones struck 2 non-residential buildings, and a second time in November 2023 when Moscow was reported to have stopped more than 20 drones. The overnight drone attacks came as Ukrainian forces continued to push into Russia's western Kursk region. Ukraine's strike on 3 key bridges in the last week has trapped Russian forces, as well as crippling their logistical capabilities. Russia subsequently built at least 3 pontoon bridges across the Sime River, but at least one of those is confirmed to have been destroyed by a Ukrainian drone on Wednesday. While stretched thin, Ukrainian forces are moving towards the goal of its land incursion into the Kursk region, which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said is to create a buffer zone as well as weaken the Russian military. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to claim that the Ukrainian attacks are acts of terrorism.
The same way we fought with terrorists previously, now we fight with those who commit crimes in the Kursk region, Donbass and Novorossiya. But the same way we achieved our goals in the fight against terrorism, we will achieve our goals in the fight against neo-Nazism. And we will certainly punish the criminals. There can be no doubt about that.
And going on with business as usual, Putin welcomed Chinese Premier Li Qiang to Moscow on Wednesday, praising the close economic and trade relations between the two countries, while there was no indication of whether the ongoing war with Ukraine was discussed. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A much-anticipated meeting between the heads of Korea's rival political parties has been postponed. The sit-down between ruling People Power Party Chairman Han Dong-hoon and main opposition Democratic Party Chairman Lee Jae-myung had been scheduled for this coming Sunday. But the two parties are now looking to reschedule the meeting as E has tested positive for COVID-19. A date will be decided after his recovery. And health authorities here are seeking to ease public concerns over the summer resurgence in COVID-19 infections by pointing out the current contagion lies within their scope of management. Our Arirang reports.
The current COVID-19 surge in South Korea is expected to continue until the end of August. In a Wednesday briefing, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency predicted that this summer's resurgence will peak later this month before decreasing.
This summer's COVID-19 surge is expected to peak at the end of August and be similar in scale to last year's.
The agency added that the reasons for this COVID-19 surge include the fact that last winter's outbreak was not very severe and the COVID-19 vaccination rate has been relatively low. However, the KDCA also stated that the current management system is sufficient to handle the situation.
The current situation should be seen as part of the process of COVID-19 becoming endemic, not as a crisis like the pandemic from 2020 to 2022.
According to the agency, the number of COVID-19 inpatients from 220 hospitals nationwide dramatically increased from 226 in the third week of July to 1,366 in the second week of this month. However, the agency emphasized that the cumulative fatality rate from January 2020 to August 2023 was 0.1% and is similar to that of seasonal flu. It has ensured a stable supply of treatments and test kits to protect high-risk groups such as the elderly and in case of a potential uptick in cases. The KDCA has announced that treatments for about 180,000 people will be distributed by the 26th. These supplies are planned to last for high-risk groups until October, after which they'll be provided more steadily through the general healthcare system. Around 3.25 million test kits are expected to be supplied. The Ministry of Health and Welfare recently said that effective vaccines against the current variants will be supplied starting in October, urging people to follow personal hygiene measures. Koshien, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the health implications of the latest heatwave here in Korea have been grim. Some 3,000 cases of heat-related illnesses have been reported from May 20th to this past Tuesday, that was August 20th. Also during the 3-month period, 28 people lost their lives. Weather officials believe daytime temperatures will continue to hover well above 30 degrees Celsius in the days ahead. Accordingly, the Interior Ministry is urging the public to refrain from outdoor activities during the hottest hours between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. and to drink plenty of water. Also, the government will maintain its reduced fuel tax rates for 2 more months until the end of October, amid rampant fears of a wider war in the Middle East. Our correspondent Moon Hye-ryan has more.
The South Korean government is extending fuel tax cuts until the end of October, as global oil prices surge with mounting tensions in the Middle East. That's according to Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok during an economic meeting on Wednesday.
Volatile global oil prices due to the recent escalating tensions in the Middle East to place a burden on people's livelihoods. As a result, the government will be extending the fuel tax cut for 2 months until the end of October.
Currently, the tax on gasoline is levied at 656 Korean won per litre, with a tax rate cut of 20% applied. For diesel, it's 407 won per litre, down by 30%. Back in July 2022, the government expanded the fuel tax cut rate to 37% for gasoline and diesel in an attempt to stabilize consumer prices before reducing the rate in steps. This is the 11th time that the government has extended the fuel tax cuts, as they were due to expire at the end of this month. Global oil prices have been prone to fluctuations in recent days, with uncertainties in how the conflict between Israel and Iran will play out. On Wednesday, oil prices slipped as mediators from Egypt and Qatar, as well as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, pushed for a ceasefire agreement. However, the market is volatile, with oil prices rising for 5 straight sessions due to positive US economic data a week before. Stabilizing domestic consumer prices is a key reason behind the extension of the fuel tax reduction measures. Last month, oil prices at home rose 8.4% year-on-year as the government lowered the fuel tax cut rate. This is the highest increase seen since October 2022. Initially, the government expected revenue from traffic, energy and environment taxes to reach 15.3 trillion won this year, or around $11.5 billion, which is up by more than 40% than last year. Due to the extension of the oil tax reduction measures, tax revenue could be lower than expected. 문혜련, Arirang News.
In other news, Kyoto International High School, which includes a large number of Korean Japanese students, has advanced the finals of the Japanese High School Baseball Championship for the first time. The school defeated Aomori Yamada High School 3-2 in the semi-finals this past Wednesday. Some 30% of Kyoto International High School's student body is of Korean descent, and its school song begins in Korean, describing the land across the East Sea, a phrase that resonated across the baseball stadium before and after the match. The school is poised to play Kanto Daiichi High School this coming Friday for the championship.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today with updates on the luxury yacht that sank off the Italian coast of Sicily on Monday, with 4 bodies retrieved from the wreckage by rescue divers on Wednesday. The Italian Coast Guard has not yet formally identified the bodies, but rescuers have been searching for 4 British and 2 American nationals, including Mike Lynch and his daughter, alongside chairman of Morgan Stanley Bank International, Jonathan Bloomer, and his wife. The Koshien, a 56-meter luxury yacht owned by Lynch's wife, was carrying 10 crew and 12 passengers when it sank, with only 15 survivors from a total of 22 on board. Those on board were reportedly guests of Mike Lynch, founder of the software company Autonomy, who had gathered to celebrate his acquittal in a US fraud case. The Koshien was anchored 700 meters off the port of Porticello when it was hit by a suspected ferocious pre-dawn tornado over the water, also known as a watersprout, and sank. The body of the vessel's cook was recovered on Monday. Social media influencer Andrew Tate was held overnight by Romanian police on Wednesday over a new set of allegations, including trafficking and sex with a minor, money laundering, and attempting to influence witnesses. Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan were taken in for questioning by Romania's Serious Crime Agency, Gov't, and remanded in custody for 24 hours as investigators searched their properties for evidence. Tate, who has a massive following on social media, was already awaiting trial for charges of rape and human trafficking, both of which the brothers have denied. According to Govt's statement, 4 houses were searched on Wednesday morning in Romania's capital Bucharest and in Ilfov County. The Tate brothers are former kickboxers of dual UK-US citizenship who are accused of exploiting women involved in their adult content business. The Tates were first detained in Romania in December 2022 and released from house arrest in August 2023. In India, at least 17 people have been killed and 41 injured in a blast at a pharmaceuticals manufacturing plant in Andhra Pradesh state in the south of the country. The explosion occurred at the pharma company Essentia Advanced Sciences manufacturing unit, which spans over 40 acres in the Achutapuram Special Economic Zone. District officials said they suspect an electricity-related fire. The local police superintendent said that while rescue operations are underway, the death toll is likely to go up. Local media reported that bodies of several workers were feared to be trapped under the rubble, while the force of the explosion launched severed body parts of some workers across the factory grounds. Essentia manufactures intermediate chemicals and active pharmaceutical ingredients. The state government has ordered an inquiry into the incident. Now finally to Spain, where world's oldest person, American-born Spaniard Maria Brañas, died on Tuesday, aged 117. Born in San Francisco on March 4, 1907, Before her family returned to Spain, Brañas attributed her long life to avoiding toxic people. She was named the oldest known person in the world by the Gerontology Research Group after the death of French nun Lucille Randon last year. Brañas lived through the 1936-39 Spanish Civil War and 2 pandemics, the 1918 Spanish flu and the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. The Gerontology Research Group said that Japan's Tomiko Itooka, who is 116 years old, is the next oldest person alive, becoming the candidate for the Guinness World Records World's Oldest Person title. Brañas' family said that she is in her sleep, at peace and without pain. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's Choseot today, the second autumn seasonal term. But the long-awaited so-called Choseot magic is not going to happen this year. Statistically, weather turns towards autumn at this time, but Korea remains in the grip of an intense heat wave. Also, those in the east should notice a huge jump in highs this afternoon, topping out at 36 degrees Celsius in Gangneung. Meanwhile, sunshine will turn darker with showers this afternoon. Expect to see 5 to 60 millimeters of showers, heavier rain in the northern parts of Korea. Dropping mercury to the low 30s, but feels like temperatures stay a couple of degrees higher. Seoul and Chuncheon should get up to 31 degrees, Gwangju topping out at 32 degrees Celsius. It feels like we are in the middle of summer, but I'm sure many of you can tell the autumn is well underway, with sunsets getting earlier each day. But it is going to take another week or so for it to feel like autumn. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the risk of a giant earthquake.